Hi, everybody. It's that time of year again when we have to start planning our annual planning sessions. So I share this video every year with both my clients, my past clients, and anybody else I've engaged with that I'm just hoping and dreaming that you have a great annual planning session. My personal mission is to make sure that no great idea dies for the wrong reasons. So I share this with you out of love and respect. So let's get into it a little bit. So there's a couple things in this video, so you can skip ahead or completely avoid it if that doesn't fit with you. We're going to answer the question, why do we have annual planning sessions, and a little bit behind that. We're going to talk about how to build your agenda for your annual planning session, and I've got some great insight on that. How to prepare everyone for a great session. So, once you even have an agenda, you really want everyone to come prepared to do amazing things. So we'll talk about that. And then we'll talk about what people get wrong in when they have their annual session, including some of the more logistical realities around putting that together. And I got a bunch of free resources in here. Once again, certainly love to have you hire me if you haven't done so already. But really, this is really about making sure the world has more great planning sessions this year. So include some of the resources out there, an agenda building template you can download, find a coach session link so I can help you find a coach if you want to do that. Annual session prep checklist. There's a really simple checklist to make sure you kind of thought through everything. I'll take all the stuff that I talk about in this video and put it in a list. Links to some organizational assessments are in there, and then some personal assessments, and then some additional materials on running great sessions. So let's get right into it. Why do we do annual planning sessions? Well, the reality is that this is part of things that great business builders have been talking about since the 1950s. All of the great writers on these topics have always said annual planning is something you should do. And it has two parts. It is part of a regular approach to meetings. You should do a standard set of meetings inside your organization, whether you're 2 people or 20 million people around the world. Having a regular way of approaching this gives everyone great insight into how to prepare for the meetings and how everyone else is doing. You really want to create that kind of synchronicity as much as possible. And a standard part of this is figuring out once a year, dedicating yourself to the way out there. And we'll talk about, how much time we put out there based on some analysis and a model that we have for that. And ultimately, it's also about making sure that I have everything I'm doing today connects to what I'm trying to accomplish long term. So we have this kind of model of this perfected path. Your path will not be this straight. Sorry about that. But we come up with a just cause or a core focus or that BHAG out there that's way out there, something beyond the BHAG. There's like that vision we have for the future we want to live in. That's beyond the horizon. Then we come up with some way of measuring that. That's maybe if you're EOS, it's a 10-year target. It's the BHAG. If you're Jim Collins, 90 has the compelling, audacious goal, the CAG. But something out there that's relatively simple that we're all kind of aiming at right now, and then we start building in the picture with more and more definitions. We get closer, just like you're looking at something down, on the horizon. 3-year picture is a common thing in EOS. 3-year plans are a common part of a lot of businesses, and having that 1-year plan, a lot of definition in the 1-year plan, because we should know to a great extent where we are and how things are going to go over the next year. We're going to get better and better at that. So we judge ourselves on whether we get there, then ultimately we have a quarterly plan as well. So we want these things to cascade. We want to get down to the place where when I show up every week, Monday morning, the things I'm going to be working on are things that are getting me towards that long-term goal. And the best way to do that is to really solidify those long-term goals once a year. Now, let's look at our hierarchy of needs model. Now, some of you might be familiar with this from an individual standpoint. I'll move my little floating head here somewhere so it's out of the way. But we talk about this notion of being survival. See, I'm on the way again. About survival is the same like the physiological needs. So if you're in that survival mode, chances are you don't have time for a 1-year planning session. That's fine. But as soon as you get to the sustainable place, that's when you want to have that vision. You want to have clear vision for 1 to 2 years out. You should be able to plan that far ahead. In general. So then we get to scalable, when you're planning a little bit further out, 2 to 5 years, achievement, 5 to 10 years. And then we have this model for the fully activated companies are looking at the far out vision. They're really spending time on that. And this is one of those things we talk about with Amazon. Jeff Bezos, before we left Amazon, was he was living in the future. He was living in, he said, he said, I have to make three great decisions today that impact this business 20 years out. So he was living out there. For you, you don't have time to live out there. So the annual planning session is about spending that time working on that vision. And I don't want you working on it all the time. I don't want it coming up in your weekly meetings. I don't want it in your quarterly meetings, but coming up with a long-term vision. The only time we give ourselves to do that is this annual session. And that's what Michael Porter and Jim Collins, all those guys really think that an annual planning session where we get everyone together, get off site, and we talk about this stuff and really dig into it and spend some time on it is an important part of making sure that the work we do every day is actually aligned towards a longer term goal. So these three sections, if you're in any of these three areas of the maturity model, this video is for you, and annual planning should be for you, absolutely. So there's three types of meetings we talk about in general. Once again, I just want to drill it in. The weekly meeting is all about making sure that we're going to successfully have a quarter. The quarterly meeting is really about making sure we're making progress towards our annual plan. And the annual meeting is everything else. So that's the time when we reset the vision. We really come up with a long-term strategy, reset the 3-year plan, all that long-term stuff. This is the only time I want you to spend a lot of time on it as a team. You're going to prepare for the annual meeting. I'm going to tell you about what I think my suggestions are for that. But ultimately, that's really the point here. All right, so let's talk about the annual session planning agenda. So in the quarterly session, if you're not running on EOS or Scaling Up or any other 90 OS, any operating systems that are kind of published, you probably have some kind of quarterly planning you do. I'm mostly using the terminology that comes out of 90 OS these days. We're still going to have rocks. There's going to be tools to go learn. But this is the standard agenda that my clients operate on for their one-day quarterly session. And it's really mostly about, hey, how did we do last quarter? What are we going to do next quarter? What are we doing to mature ourselves and solving some issues to make sure we're making progress? Well, the annual session is 2 days, 2 full days. That's the intention for the leadership team. Has done 2 full days, and there's a couple things to point out that's different. So we have a team health section. You got to spend some time. We bake a little bit of time into the weekly meeting to build team health. We spend a little bit of time on it in the quarterly, but to really dig in and make those quantum steps towards having a more healthy team, you should put some time into it. It's a couple of hours maybe where you go through some exercises, and I'm going to tell you what those exercises could be in the rest of the video. Organizational checkup. There's EOS and Scaling Up and 90 OS. All of these guys have some sense of being able to some model for how you strengthen the business, the things you should be good at it as business. How are you doing against that model? And I'll have some links to some tests you can take there. All those are free. The SWOT, that's the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Lots of versions of this and approaches to it. I'm going to tell you just a few things about mine. But that's where you really kind of looking the most outside the business and trying to figure out how to, the context you're in, how that is going to impact you and in what time frame. That vision and plan section, that's something we do every quarter, looking at all those things in vision plans and validating them. And there's validation questions. If you don't know what those are, that's something for another day. Put some time with me. There's a link for that, and I'll tell you all about it. Then that's where we reset our 3-year plan. We're always pushing the envelope down a little bit. We're just at a moving, framework where are we going to be 3 years from now, 3 short years from now? What do we want to have accomplished? What do we need to be on track to get to that compelling, audacious goal that we've set, 5 to 20 years out. And then we also set our 1-year plan, once again, that same thing, like that path towards infinity. What do we have to accomplish this next year to be on track to get to our 3 years? So once we set the 3-year, what do we need to accomplish this next year? And that's what really gives us a setup for having a great year and rocks that matter. Rocks that are really helping us get towards that ultimately long-term plan. So I'm just going to take a couple seconds at each of these sections here, and feel free to jump ahead if you need to. First of all, team health. We talk about this in terms of the Johari window, this notion that there's things I know about myself and you know about me, but I need to start unwrapping some of these other 2 sections, the blind section and the hidden section. So because that's how I'm going to build stronger relationships, better understanding of each other. We'll know how to talk to each other. We'll know what to expect from each other. So much of what goes on in the drama that goes on in many teams really comes from not having a good sense of everybody that's on the team. So we often tell personal stories. That's a pretty simple one. There's a one thing exercise that's that's been shared for a long time, where, hey, what's the one thing you can start doing or stop doing to help the team be strong? 5 dysfunctions of a team. This is a Patrick Lencioni book. It's a classic. A lot of great materials around that for everyone to read the book and then to work through and make some decisions about, hey, how strong are we as a team, and what can we do to be stronger as a team? How do we get rid of those dysfunctions? And then there's profiling, and I got to talk a little bit more about that, but really understanding each other from a measurable scientific perspective. We have really good science and understanding people, both from how we work together, but also how we hire. And that's just something if you want to be a great company, you're going to have to hire great people. And the best way to make sure you're hiring the right people in the right seats is to have some profiling as part of what you're doing here. There's a great link in here later on for a trust score approach. So understanding where everyone is as far as trusting everyone. That's something not for the weak or for new teams. If you haven't ever done anything like that, I don't suggest it. It's a big one. So let's go into some of the profiling. So profiling options that I recommend. First of all, I don't recommend DISC. It's very old. It's very simple, but it doesn't tell you enough. It is relatively inexpensive. If you've done nothing else, at least do that. So it's better than nothing, but not by a lot. Colby is one that EOS suggests, and it's at 4 numbers there. I'm showing you my stuff here. 8443 is what is me. And people say, "Oh, Jim, I think you're more of a quick start than that." Well, I'm heavily modulated to quick start. Long story, you can ask about it some other time. But that's actually been validated. You can use it for hiring. There are tools for exactly that purpose. There's Colby A, B, C. I mean, there's a full range of tools. It's a completely validated tool set. I mean, there's no bias built into it that would keep anyone from being hired. It's really, it tells the truth. And there's Type Coach, which is one of our favorite versions of the Myers-Briggs model. So you can see I'm an ENTJ there, some words around what it is to work with me. A lot of my startups have a lot of NTs in them. And that's pretty common because we tend to like to make trouble. That's a great one. Very, very effective in helping people, trying to figure people out. Not necessarily a great hiring tool, but a really good way to understand your team. Enneagram or Print is another one. I'm a 1-5. Also got a lot of information about that. And it's also the oldest of them. It's actually prehistoric in its modeling almost. Goes back a very long time. We're trying to figure out the personality types. Predictive Index and then Culture Index is the last one we'll talk about. It's validated. It's the newest of them. It's the most modern of them. It's a little bit harder to understand. You can see a picture of that ABCD model down there. And what that, it takes a little bit to start to understand it. And there's great courseware in that, but it's super, super accurate, and also completely valid for hiring. So consider one of those. Also, one of the newer ones is this very simple tool. Once again, Patrick Lencioni, he's the master of this kind of stuff. He's written a book called The 6 Types of Working Genius. And there's as you imagine, because it always is, there's also an online survey you can take. It's only $25, I think, to take it, to figure out which of the archetypes it is. They spell widget. That's, he's clever that way. And there's also a tool to figure out what your team map is. Who on the team fits well with which person, and do you have all the right people? So it's a pretty good way of finding gaps. So and once again, you see there, the links are all at the end of the presentation. I also want to say that there's great reason to think about, if you are following one of the business models pretty closely, it's great to lean into their models. They all have models for figuring out how strong or how valid or how, whether you have a competency in all the areas that they think are most important. That's a great way to have something external to yourself that measures your progress towards being great at these things and really having these competencies. So I highly recommend those. A couple of links there to both the pure EOS model that EOS Worldwide provides, and also one that's provided by 90, which is a little bit more wide open, but both great tools for figuring that kind of stuff out. Now, when you're going to 3 year and 1 year planning, I want you to think about both the one thing that people do make mistakes on with this is I want you to take as many notes as possible. You're going to have the top of that model. Almost all of them have a, hey, what are the financials for our 3 and 1 year plan? But then also what are some measurables? That's our lagging indicators and our leading indicators. But also you're going to come up with, hey, what do I need to accomplish in that time frame? And gosh, I really want you to get good at taking notes around these things. All of these things, there's a place where people really don't take advantage of. We use 90 as a tool with all my clients, and there's a place for there to keep copious notes and attachments and links to things. Make this a place to gather the information so you're never wondering about context. So SWOT, at this point, the only thing I do differently about SWOT really is one, I give assignments to people. So all the strengths can have an owner, and they also have a time frame. All the opportunities have an owner and a time frame. So you're in charge of dealing with that and tracking it and doing research on it and keeping an understanding of it. I've had great experiences where I've had clients who did a SWOT and were able to get rid of all their weaknesses over a couple of year period. So they hadn't done it in 2 years, and I started working with them. Let's go back and look at the SWOT. And we knocked out all the weaknesses because we focused on making sure that we were doing that. So I think it's a great thing to do. The only time we do that is at the annual. Okay, what people get wrong about their annual. So once of all, get off site. Everyone, going back to the very beginning, and Peter Drucker says you should change the scenery, find some place that inspires creativity. We do that at our session rooms. We've got games. We're right next to a Top Golf. We go down there. So we're trying to find that place where you're not just churning your work. There's a lot that Jim Collins talks about in B2.0, where you've got to instill the opportunity for creative thought. This is the one you want to do it. Don't over-engineer the timing. I have this next week, actually, we have our first at the Impact Leadership Center. We have our first annual, and those will go through March. So people, for various reasons, will time them at various times. I just talking to a client today. We're not going to do theirs until next July. So we're going to have a July, and it's not the first time it's happened. It's not unusual. What's the best time? What's the most meaningful time for you to do annual planning? And your years can wrap in a little time. I mean, your future date, your focused future date, for 1 year and 3 year can be July 4th, next year. That's completely fine. So the beginning of the process, if you're the leader of the organization, go back and review last year's meeting. Make sure you're not going to make the same mistakes. Take yourself back into that headspace and understand what worked well. Do your own plus delta, the things that work well and things that you could do better. And make sure that you've got that in mind, and then start your planning for this year. You got to get everyone enough time to prepare, and I've got that's, like I said, that slide for that is linked in here, as is the deck, so you can have that for later on. Be objective driven, not agenda driven. So there is an agenda. You should have a plan for how you're going to get through all the material, but understand what's most urgent and important, and it's really having a really effective plan. And quite often my teams learn the hard way that they need more than the time that they gave. Hey, we only planned a day. We really needed a day and a half. We only had 2 days. We needed a third day to really dig into all the things we're working on right now. That's fine, because it's more important to have an entire year of effective activity, of execution against a really solid planning cycle than it is to go fast with this and then go all over the place over your next year. We're not currently in a lockdown period, but certainly, the best you possibly can. The annual is the one time a year where I would say you almost have to have everyone together. It's hard to do this work over Zoom, and to really get to know each other. And you're going to have a better team. You're going to have a better opportunity to build a strong strategy and a strong vision if you're all together. If you've got more than 7 people on your leadership team, you're going to have to add more time to your schedule. And part of the template I give you is a reminder of that. You've got to think about, there's some sections that are per person, and you've got to just add some time for that. And in general, this is another Jim Collinsism. You probably have some people on your team that have no problem speaking up, and they can go through a really quick meeting and be effective. But some of your wisest people probably don't speak up as much, and you need to give them time and space to participate. Otherwise, they get frustrated, 1, and 2, you miss out on their genius. So make room for everyone's genius and when you're planning this, and that means you just can't, bang through this. You really got to give it some time and some breathing space to make things work. Okay. And then I would suggest having someone facilitate. So I do this every year where I help some people find a facilitator for their meeting. It's not as expensive as you think. A lot of the coaches like myself do have some facilitation rates that aren't the same as my coaching rate, because my coaching rate, I spend a lot of time with you. I get really deep in. So you can really, for a couple of grand, find someone who's really going to come in and at least keep you as the leader of the organization not spending time focusing on facilitation, and get through a much better meeting. Once again, it's one time a year. It's the only time you're looking at some of these things. It's well worth it. So I'll go really quick through the resources here so we can get you out of here. First of all, I'm happy to walk you through this plan and help you with these things. It's part of my commitment to making sure that great ideas don't die for the wrong reasons. It's my Help First Hour, so it's QR code. You can see my calendar link down there. Feel free to take advantage of that as you're able. Here's my pre-work checklist. It goes through all the things I'm going to talk about today. There's nothing here I didn't talk about. It's maybe cleaning up your issues list. If you're not working within an operating system, you might want me to tell you more about issues lists. Go ahead and ask that question. But here I'll get my face out of the way of some of the words. But feel free to. Once again, you'll have a download of this deck to play with, to know what you're to help you plan. I can help you find yourself a coach. Where I want to put my face now? Okay, up in Canada. Once again, I've got a very short meeting here that I can help you ask a handful of questions and figure out who I can send you to, who can help you facilitate your meeting. Actually, it's well worth it to find a facilitator. At least consider it. If you haven't done it before, please consider it. Talk to some people, and like I said, it's well worth it when you're spending so much time in the room. Think about the money you're spending with all the people that are there, and you want them to get the most out of them. Facilitator makes it easier to be really efficient with that. And there's just a downloadable template here for planning your time. You can see all the things that are typically the timings that are typically part of an annual session. This is a 2-day version of that. So if you're going to do less than that or more than that, you can adjust those timings and just figure out how that's going to take. But thinking about it, bit by bit. If you don't have 90, this is a great tool set. And I use it with my clients anyway, even though they do have 90, just to kind of talk through each of those pieces. Last couple bits here. One of the storytelling bits, I'm keep moving around here, is this 4H's model, where, and this just is here for you as a resource if you wanted to do this, use this as one of your exercises. And there's some more information about meeting cadences. And lastly, make sure your departments do the same thing. So after you have your company annual, it's great to let the departments do the same thing. Usually it looks something like this, where the leadership team gets together, they make their rock smart, they say to the company, and the departments can flow down from all that stuff. And all these resource links are here. So that's it. Hopefully you get a chance to watch this at 1.5 speed, so you don't have to hear me blab for very long. Happy to help out. All of these links are here for your benefit. Have a great annual, and I'm here to help. Thanks, everybody.